to the City Council regular meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. The time is now 6:30 p.m. Will everyone please stand and join us for the flag salute? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Madam Clerk, may you please take roll?
Councilmember Gama,
Here.
Councilmember McQueen-LaJean.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Perez,
Here.
Mayor Martinez,
Present.
and Councilmember Hernandez is currently absent.
Okay. Tonight's inspiration will be provided by Councilmember Martha McQueen-LaJean.
Thank you, Mayor. As we have approached this holiday season and we began our holiday season about a week or so ago with Thanksgiving, I just wanted to share a little bit about the other type of Thanksgiving, not the sitting at the table and eating, but actually giving thanks. And so wanted to share a little bit about that and gratitude. As we've entered this holiday season, beginning with Thanksgiving, as I said just about a week ago, it's caused me to reflect upon my personal feelings about the holiday season. What I've realized is while I may not have all of my wants, I do have all of my needs, and they've all been met. Now, that might not be the case for everyone, but I think everyone has something to be thankful for. During the season of Thanksgiving or giving thanks, let's focus on being grateful for what we do have, whether that be our families, our friends, our health, our peace of mind, the ability to care for ourselves, and our freedoms. Whatever it is for you, give thanks. It begins with gratitude. So expressing the gratitude connects us to people, builds resilience, it creates stronger social bonds, it improves relationships. So let's breathe in gratitude and breathe out a thank you, because it really can always be worse. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. That's very beautiful inspiration. And we will now move on to public comments not pertaining to any of the items on the agenda. The comments are limited to 3 minutes. This process will be the same for the remaining comments on other agenda items. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments tonight?
We have no general public comments. The public comments we have received pertain to items on the agenda.
Thank you. May I have a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda?
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can we please take a vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Do any members of council have any conflicts of interest to disclose for any one agenda item? Okay, so we're actually now going to recess the city council meeting and call to order the Housing Authority regular meeting, and it's now 6:34 p.m. Madam Clerk, can you please take roll call for the Housing Authority?
Member Brown? Member Blackwell? Member Gama?
Here.
Member McQueen-LaJean?
Here.
Vice Chair Perez?
Here.
Chair Martinez?
Present.
And let the record reflect, Member Hernandez is absent.
So I'm assuming we don't have any public comments?
No public comments.
Okay. We're now going to consider items on the Housing Authority consent calendar, which will be enacted in one motion unless an authority member has a request to remove an item for discussion. Do I have a motion in a second?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can we please take vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Okay. So moving forward with the Housing Authority business item, number 4, rental assistant demonstration RAD update. Will staff please present the report?
Yeah, and we have a couple short PowerPoint, and I'll be turning it over to our Housing and Facilities Maintenance Director, Gabby Basua, in a moment. I wanted to just start quickly with a very brief introduction, because I had to have Gabby explain the rental assistance demonstration projects to me a couple of times, and then I had to read some documents to understand it because it's almost unnecessarily complicated. So I wanted to just start by setting the stage quite simply by explaining what the rental assistance demonstration program is. And that is very simply that the city owns these public housing units at Willowbrook and Mar Vista. And one of the challenges that cities are facing, and it's across the country, is that cities don't have funding to remodel or maintain their properties. One of the numbers that HUD points to consistently is they estimate there's $35 billion, I believe it was, with a B, $35 billion in deferred maintenance that somehow need to be funded. And one of the challenges cities has is that we can't just go out and get loans against our property, or we can't go out and mortgage our property to get money to maintain them. And so essentially, the rental assistance demonstration program was created so that we could create a nonprofit, put the properties into the nonprofit, and then that nonprofit can go out and get funding to do remodels and repairs and things like that. And so it's a little more complicated than that, but I just wanted to sort of start with that because maybe it'll help us sort of understand where this is going and why we're looking at this, because potentially we do have properties that need maintenance, and are going to have to figure out how to fund them, and this is one of the paths. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gabby to give a little bit more background.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, commissioners and staff. To my right, I have Nathan Bondor. He's from LIHTC, and he's here from New Jersey. He's our city consultant, housing authority consultant that we hired back in 2019 to assist us with this transition. So this is a PowerPoint that we showed back in 2019 to the council at the time. I wanted to bring this PowerPoint back because I know we have new council members, and after speaking to Kevin, he thought it was a really good idea to bring this item back to your attention. It's important to note that the council at the time in 2019 authorized us to go ahead and enter into what we call a CHAP with HUD, and that has been done. What we're here today for is to ask for authorization to form the nonprofit. So I'm going to just go really quickly through the slides, tell you a little bit of why we're requesting, and if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me during the presentation. So like our city manager said, this is something that it's a new program. Well, not really new anymore. It's been around for a few years, more than a few years. It's called the RAD 8, what we're calling the RAD 18. And it was basically done by HUD in order to address the $26 billion nationwide backlog of deferred maintenance. So public housing, what is public housing? Public housing, at least in the city of Hueneme, consists of 90 units. It consists of 30 units at Hueneme Village, 60 units at Mar Vista. It's 21 bedroom apartments at Mar Vista and 40 studios. Hueneme Village has 4 one-bedroom units, 12 two-bedroom units, and 14 three-bedroom units. Hueneme Village houses mostly all families. For those of you that do not know what, I'm sure you do, you know what Mar Vista looks like. Here's a picture of it. The second property is Willowbrook, and it is a cul-de-sac off Hueneme Road. So what is RAD and Section 18 blend? It is basically a model that HUD is allowing public housing authority agencies, and this is just for the properties that are owned by HUD and the housing authority. It has nothing to do with the Section 8 program. which we also manage in-house. It allows us to go into a platform where we would have more availability to our assets. So for example, right now, we depend on what we call the capital fund in order to make improvements to our building. Those capital funds are very limited. Approximately, we get about anywhere between 120,000 to 150 a year, and that in itself needs to be used to modernize public housing, while those funds are no longer enough. We have a backlog of deferred maintenance that we can no longer keep up with. So this new module here will allow us to do good things for our public housing. The biggest thing here is that now we're at the point where HUD is really pushing us to do all this forward. Today, we just asked for another extension. HUD has already told us we're probably, this is it, Housing Authority. You must convert, or we're taking the CHAP, what they call the CHAP away. Basically, what it is the intent of the Housing Authority, and we are not asking for authorization at this time, but the vision of the Housing Authority is to be able to redevelop what we call Hueneme Village, which is right here. We currently have, if I can point, this area here, we have approximately a little bit over 2 acres. And in those 2 acres, we have 30 units. They are modeled as what we would call, back in the day, if you heard, you live in the projects. Well, HUD is trying to get away from that model. We are trying to now build into the community where if you're driving by, you're not even going to know it's public housing. It's going to be able to fit within the community. I anticipate that if allowed, I would be able to bring in additional units into this area and allow for more affordable housing. So our process at this point is asking our board for authorization to create a nonprofit that would actually hold the title to these 2 properties. By holding the titles to these 2 properties, then that nonprofit can leverage these assets. And it's important to note that we currently have no debt. These properties are paid in full. We have no mortgage. We've got nothing. But it would allow us to go to the bank, use tax credits in order to rebuild this area. Obviously, this is very down the road, but we are trying to at least start the process to be able to get there. So that's why we're here tonight to ask for authorization to create the nonprofit, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
If I can just add quickly, so as part of the recommendation, we're recommending creating a nonprofit. And then we wanted to point out in the staff report, we noted how we recommend creating that nonprofit, creating a nonprofit with the name Hueneme Housing, Inc. that would perform these services. The nonprofit would be operated with the city council as its board of directors, and staff. Some of our staff would serve positions so to help avoid any additional costs or things like that. So we're recommending forming the nonprofit with that makeup. So,
Are there any questions?
Yeah. So it's the first time I'm hearing this, so I have a lot of things on my mind here. So in the nonprofit, so the nonprofit would hold the properties,
Yes.
and so the ability for loans or financing would be based on putting the properties up for loans,
Possibly.
possibly. How else thank you for that answer, because how else would you get the funding to do?
So especially in California, we have a lot of different things that we can start applying for, and that is something that we will work towards. Tax credit. Obviously, this land is worth a lot of money. Obviously, it's about a block away from the beach. So if need be, that's what we would do in order to finance the redevelopment of this area.
So just tell me how the financial liability happens in this nonprofit.
Go ahead.
So again, just taking a step back for a second, the way the Housing Authority operates right now, they have a contract with HUD. It's called an annual contributions contract, which means that the Housing Authority, because of this requirement with HUD, is barred from leveraging any equity that the property has. So part of the process, and again, it's a very complex legal process, is removing that agreement with HUD. HUD will not remove that agreement unless we comply with thousands of pages of documents and requirements for the residents, for the community in order to get there. But once those requirements are moved, so the reason why the Housing Authority is creating a nonprofit is simply because it needs to be another entity. Now, remind you that this nonprofit is going to be 100% owned by the Housing Authority. So it's kind of like, I liken it if somebody wants to open up a store, a bakery, whatever it may be. From a legal perspective, typically somebody will open up an LLC. What's the LLC? It's a limited liability. So we all know if it's Shirley's Bakery, it's Shirley, but yet it's her bakery. So if something happens, it won't be on her. So what's going on with this other entity that's being created by the Housing Authority is HUD does not want the Housing Authority to rent the property to itself. I liken it to somebody who would go to a bank and say, hey, I found somebody who's going to rent my house for $50,000 a month. Give me a $5 million loan. So what goes on over here is that the Housing Authority creates the other entity because they don't want you renting something to yourself, and that's where it comes along. But there are numerous hosts of requirements that go into it. For example, the Housing Authority is going to have a third-party company who's going to assess the rents. HUD does not allow the Housing Authority to do that on its own. Inspect the units, the inspections to make sure that it complies with all HUD regulations has to be done by a third party. But once HUD, and we get through all these hurdles, and there's still a lot of steps that we have to take till we get the Housing Authority out of the program, but once the Housing Authority gets there, so this contract is removed from HUD, which then allows the Housing Authority to operate as any nonprofit. So as any nonprofit, so right now the Housing Authority is heavily regulated by HUD. There's still going to be a lot of regulation from HUD, but they're going to release a lot of it. And that's really where the board comes in, which is going to be the same board. You guys remember, it's really much the same entity, and it's really the oversight to make sure that the mission and goal of the Housing Authority continues to remain. So with that being said, so now you're a nonprofit, you're released from all these restrictions from HUD. HUD is looking at the Housing Authority to be the vehicle for the community to be able to ensure that there's affordable housing in the community. And by doing so, now the Housing Authority has the opportunity. It doesn't mean you have to do anything. And again, that's kind of why we're here, to help make sure that the Housing Authority has a good financial plan, which of course would be reviewed by the board before we get there. But then getting back to your question about the financing, so it's really going to determine what the Housing Authority's plans are, and that's where we come in to help the Housing Authority make sure that we can fit it, whether it's grants, whether it's state funds, federal funds, tax credits, bank loans. There's a host of opportunities that right now the Housing Authority is not eligible to tap. So that's really what this point of this program is to do. And again, I like to say from a public policy standpoint, we spend a lot of time, we work with a lot of housing authorities. In an ideal world, you would go to HUD and say, hey, we need a new roof, we need new windows, can we have $1 million to fix it? The problem is that HUD does not have any money, they get funded by the government, we all know what budgets are like, and this is their best alternative. So I hope that answers your question, but that's what we're looking for with the financing to figure out the best play that works for the Housing Authority. Sure.
Financial burden as it relates, none whatsoever.
Not even a financial burden. I mean, if anything, there's a financial boon for the city. So basically, HUD is trying to get out of the public housing business. And they're actually encouraging, if you speak to the local field offices, we're on the phone with DC every day talking about this. This is their solution. So instead of being able to write a check to the Housing Authority for, say, $1 million a year or $1 million to fix something, what they're doing is they're increasing the rent. So the way it works is the Housing Authority is now eligible for a larger subsidy. And now that larger subsidy means, that the HUD will be paying the Housing Authority more money. Tenant rents will be staying the same. It's just the amount of money. So now HUD is saying, we can't give you the $1 million check, but we can increase your income $100,000 a year and we'll pay it out monthly, or yearly, depending on, the program. But that's really where it hits. So as far as, from a financial liability from the city point, if anything, it's a financial boon because now the Housing Authority has money to leverage to be able to build up affordable housing within the entire Port Hueneme.
And the funding really is, it's about the congressional budget.
Correct. Exactly.
Thank you.
Member Brown?
you're gonna try to get money to fix up Willowbrook area, right?
All the properties. Yeah. It's going to affect every property.
So Member Brown, we already started the process of doing Mar Vista. We've already started with the remodel units inside. We've done the windows. We still need to do the roof. We've got money this year to do the elevators. We are already started that process at Mar Vista.
So if you don't mind, just add one more point I think is important for the board to note. In order for the Housing Authority to be eligible to participate, HUD requires what's called a needs assessment, which is a comprehensive architectural and engineering report done by a third-party national company. They have to come in, they have to assess the report to HUD standards, not local standards. And in order for the Housing Authority to participate, it actually goes in the contract, that report. Now, this report will demonstrate not only what the Housing Authority's needs are now, but what the needs are for the next 20 years, which Housing Authority has already had done. So they may say that, your windows are in good shape, but in 8 years from now, they're going to need new windows. HUD needs to make sure before they allow the Housing Authority to participate that there's going to be money in the budget to pay for those windows in 8 years from now. Just to add to that, sorry.
Other part of my question was, I thought I heard you mention about they're gonna raise the rent.
Yes. Raising the rent is not for the tenants. So the way it works is, and that's part of, there's a host of options, a little bit confusing. HUD loves to use acronyms with all these programs. But all these programs, the tenant rent is typically, there may be a couple
Thir-
flat rents, but it's
yeah,
30%
that's it.
of your income. That is going to stay the same. The only thing that's changing is the money that the Housing Authority gets from HUD. Good question.
Thank you. Can you define rebuild? When I look at Willowbrook, I'm looking at it from the standpoint when I heard you say rebuild, so what would that entail? Like, are you talking about tearing down and going up?
Yes.
And then you're displacing all those 30 units, I believe you said?
Absolutely not. We will not, by law, we cannot displace the tenants. So I want to
I know,
reassure you
but
all,
if you're gonna tear it down and build it up, they'd have to go somewhere else.
somewhere for them to go, but they would have first right to come back.
So, but what do you mean by rebuild? Do you mean like
Demolish and
double
reconstruct.
the amount of,
That is still up in the air. We don't know. What we do know is that these units have met their lifespan, and the families deserve, more modern and new housing.
hey, they look like they got really good roofs from this vantage point. They look modern, but, so I have a 2-story house and I absolutely, don't do well with stairs. And I think a lot of us don't. So would the future be multi-level,
Yeah, Member Brown,
condominiums or?
we're really not at that point yet. We are talking 5-7 years down the road. That is just a vision in order to move, affordable housing and to get more affordable housing within our area.
Right, but my concern is that, in order to get more units in this area, that it may take on a look of that industrial look that
And
we're
that-
trying to get away from.
Absolutely. You're 100% correct. And that is something that will definitely come back to the board for approval. And at that point, depending on what the board would like, they can say, nope, we've got 30 units, just replace the 30 units, or you know what, we'll do another 5, but we definitely don't want that cluttered. It's really up to the board when we get to that point.
Which board?
You.
So,
Be the city council either as the city council or as the nonprofit board, which is also the city council.
right,
So
and so then that takes me to my next, observation, standing up a nonprofit. So, and I was explaining to the future leaders of America down there before we started, the Housing Authority, how it's separate from the city. And if you notice that we have an agenda for the Housing Authority, we have an agenda for the city council. And so here we go, we're going to stand up a nonprofit to have another layer of separation from the city, but city staff is doing all the work and the city council is doing all the approval. So it's kind of redundant.
The way I understand it, it's a different vehicle to be able to benefit
So
from
I get
different-
that, but it's still the same people. So who's actually going to be the one to stand up the nonprofit? Gabby? You?
As far as,
Who does the paperwork?
that will be Kevin.
Our city attorney.
Okay. And then who is going to be on the nonprofit?
So the nonprofit, per your staff report, does state that the housing director would be the president, our secretary would be our clerk. And it goes on and let me find that area. Oh, here it says, staff would recommend that the Director of Housing and Facilities serve as the president, the city clerk serve as the secretary, the finance director serve as the treasurer. It is further recommended that the officers of the nonprofit corporation be unpaid in that capacity. Instead, the work performed on behalf of the nonprofit corporation by city staff will be a proportion in accordance to the city's payroll policy. So those people, based on their time, will get paid by the nonprofit back to the city.
So so it's kind of
So
confusing.
it's cost allocation is what we call a cost allocation.
Right, I
So,
get it.
so that's how that's going to work.
Okay, and then somebody mentioned it's a boom to the city. Can you explain that, please?
Boon.
A boon.
Boon with an N, meaning that the housing authority the housing authority now has the opportunity to tap a lot of federal resources to bring to the housing authority. So meaning
Boon.
boon.
Okay.
A significant increase. I can look up the exact definition, but
Yeah, I was kind of like, I'm gonna look it up right now because I'm still a little confused. But I miss.
it's a phenomenal opportunity for the city to participate in this program, especially for a city like Port Hueneme, which is in Southern California. I actually have many clients, again, we work nationwide, and the way these programs work is they're based on fair market rent in your community. So that means HUD is going to be paying the housing authority based on what they determine to be the fair market rent in the city, as opposed to, say, other areas of the country where the rental is much lower. It's like I'll use the example of right now, if the housing authority has an apartment that's $700 a month in rent, where the tenant's paying, say, $300 a month and HUD is paying $400 a month. Now, when we have these fair market rents, which could be $2,000 a month, HUD will be paying that difference. So instead of paying $400 a month, HUD is now going to be paying $1,700 a month for an apartment in some cases.
So Member Gama, a boon is something that leads to a beneficial outcome.
I'm looking,
Whoever.
yeah. My definition is a thing that is helpful or beneficial. The navigation system will be a boon to both civilian and military users. So in our case, this is a boon to our customers, which are people that are benefiting from the.
Correct.
And so the process to redefine the rebuild of Willowbrook, I know it's in the staff report, but what's the most important step there?
Saying as far as the rebuild goes, or as far as the
Yeah,
reposition?
and in ramping up to consider and get to the point of rebuilding
The
and.
most important step is that right now the housing authority is not able to do anything as a public housing authority. So the first step has got to be that the housing authority, and that's why different housing authorities approach it different ways. But for this housing authority, we thought it was most beneficial to remove itself from public housing, so now it has the opportunity to look into those options, which the housing authority does not have right now as a public housing authority. Every step they take has to be done together with HUD. They do not have the opportunity to leverage the value that they have right now. So the housing authority is looking to go through this conversion, complete the conversion, which is a very complex process, which we're here to assist the housing authority with. Once that's done, the housing authority, I know they've started beginning steps to talk to teams of architects and engineers to come with a plan. And then the step is within, say, a year or two, whenever that time frame comes, to come in front of the council and the board and to show a couple options, which is usually what we like to do in these cases, and have input. So we're not there yet, but we got to get through this part first in order so we can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
Hi, sorry I'm late. I did read through the report and I walked in late and noticed that we're looking at a screen saying proposed conversion, Hueneme Village, and I don't see that in the staff report. Am I missing something?
No, I think we've sort of gotten past what's in the staff report. So the staff report is basically to get the nonprofit, the approval to create the nonprofit. We were explaining 5, 10, 15 years down the road, projects that can be done by the nonprofit if the nonprofit is approved.
Because I was asking what kind of example, I was
Yeah.
thinking what kind of examples.
Yeah, and the basic
Considering.
Yeah, the
Okay.
basics is just that one of the purposes of this project is to allow, to create a nonprofit that can seek funding to do remodeling, or rebuilding of housing units.
And I don't know if this question was asked, but on a basic level, what does the city stand to lose by giving the authority over to a nonprofit?
And I think we,
The question was asked,
Okay,
and the answer
sorry, I
is
missed it.
no, no.
uh, it's really not, it's hard to think of.
Or the housing authority, I should say.
Yeah. And essentially, I think one thing that I was, one piece of information I was given that maybe can be spoken to a little bit is that essentially it sounds like HUD is kind of moving everybody in this direction. And I think one thing that kind of caught my attention is that right now HUD is trying to incentivize cities willingly going into this direction to go this way to kind of reduce their outstanding maintenance costs, which I had said 35 billion. It looks like it was 24 billion. So,
35 is updated.
okay, 35 is
Correct.
updated. Okay, thank you.
So,
Um,
said, what other cities have moved in this direction?
We have area housing that has moved in this direction. We have the Ventura Housing Authority, which was the first in our county to do so, and they did theirs about 5 years ago. And Oxnard, I believe, is coming online here shortly also.
Thank you.
And if I could just go back to to your question though about what do we have to lose? When I first heard about it, the one concern I had is if we started a new nonprofit that had completely different board members, potentially we lose control. And so that was a concern. But we've researched and come to the conclusion and made the proposal that we could create the nonprofit with our existing city council. So I couldn't think of really what we have. I couldn't think of a good answer to the question of what we have to lose at this point, other than the $6,000 to create a nonprofit.
As far as any conflict wise, the purpose of this nonprofit, I'm probably going to try and create it under a 501c2, which basically means that it holds title to properties for purposes of public benefit. And so the decisions that would come before the nonprofit are simply those decisions relating specifically to those properties. So leveraging equity and things of that nature. Considerations on how to run them or anything outside of just entering into an agreement with HUD would be beyond the purview of that nonprofit. So there's no real opportunity for conflict of interest between housing authority, city council, and the board, or danger of incompatible office. But I'm probably going to write the bylaws in such a manner that the Brown Act, well, obviously the Brown Act and the Political Reform Act still apply in full force.
Great, thank you.
And also, just one thing, if I may add, it's important to note the Housing Authority is going to continue to remain. The Housing Authority still remains a municipality. All the municipal rules that come along with it will continue.
So, excuse me, we've already have like separation. I'm just trying to understand why we couldn't go into this program without a nonprofit, being that the housing authority is a separate entity. We close our regular meeting, we open this meeting, we invite 2 more members. So, is it?
So that's the reason why I
does
addressed
it make
before.
sense?
HUD requires the Housing Authority. Part of the HUD regulations in order to participate is to have another entity. Because again, HUD wants to avoid that conflict. So even though it may seem that what's the conflict, HUD does not want the Housing Authority to rent. The way it works is there's a rental contract that's entered into. And HUD does not want that rental contract entered into from the Housing Authority to the Housing Authority. So this new layer, the nonprofit, there are different ways of going about it. We've had many discussions with council about the best way to go about it, but typically it's done through a nonprofit vehicle, which assists the Housing Authority in continuing to grow. There's a HUD requirement to participate, to enter into a new,
Councilmember Gama, eventually there will be an agreement that the housing authority has to enter into with HUD as well as the quote property owner. And the problem that arises, although the opinions differ and this is very complicated, you would have the housing authority signing on both sides of the contract unless a third party was created who would take the place as property owner.
Right.
And HUD prefers not to have somebody, well, the law really prefers not to have somebody signing on both sides of the contract.
Right, but we're all still the same.
No,
It's
it's important. Well, it's important to note though that we will be hiring a company to come out and do our inspections now. We will be hiring them to do a bit of administrative work. It's not much, but we will be taking a layer that we do in-house and putting that out because we can't sign. We've got somebody else to certify to HUD that we're actually following their rules.
Are there any public comments regarding this item?
No public comments.
Are there any other questions? The recommendation is to receive an update on the rental assistance demonstration and authorize staff to proceed with the formation of a nonprofit organization. Do I have a motion and a second?
Move to approve. Second.
Any discussion? All right, Madam Clerk, can we please take a vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
All right, we're going to move on to,
Thank you,
and
Ms.
thank you
Basile.
very much for the presentation. We're going to move on to authority members' reports, comments, and requests for future agenda items. I'll start with Member Brown. Are there any reports, comments, or requests for future agenda items? Blackwell? No? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and adjourn the Port Hueneme Housing Authority to its next meeting scheduled for February 6th at 6:30 p.m. And the City Council meeting will now reconvene. The time is now 7:07 p.m. And we're going to move on to presentation item number 5, Ventura County Broadband Strategic Project.
Hi, good evening, council members. I'm Vivian Vasquez, and this is Dr. Bill Simmons with me. We are part of the Broadband of Regional Group, so representing the Economic Development Collaborative, the Broadband BCPC, and then also VCOG as well. We're here to just give a brief update on the Broadband Strategic Project, and we hope to come back a couple times throughout the rest of the next year to give an update on this, but we just wanted to give an introductory presentation about the work that we'll be doing to keep you all up to date. Next slide, please. Oh, I have one there. Okay. Should tell that to myself. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. On the agenda here, we just wanted to give a brief overview of the context of the legislation that's come out so far for broadband, then give an update on the activities that we'll be completing and what the timeline will look like, and then talk a little bit about the outcomes that we expect for your city and for the region, and then also some things that we'd like you to consider. Firstly, as you all know, because of COVID, it became even more important for us to have really strong broadband connectivity for employment, education, for healthcare. And due to that, there was many federal legislation, state legislation giving funding to those opportunities. And so part of that is through California Broadband for All. There was SB 156 passed. And so that is how we were funded to do some local technical assistance for our area to make sure that we had a plan in place for the broadband deployment in our area. As part of the activities that we'll be completing, we've already started doing convenings, and Aaron Wedemeyer from your city has been representing your city in those convenings. We have a municipal working group representing all of the different cities in the county and the region. So we've started meeting those and talking about what we'll be needing to do to make sure that we have broadband infrastructure in place and that we're ready for those funding opportunities as they come. In addition to that, we're also doing a lot of data collection. So looking at the internet service providers in the area, what kind of internet they offer, and then also getting prepared to do speed testing in the area, which is how we make sure and validate that the internet service providers, what they're offering is actually being experienced by people on the ground. In addition to that, we'll also be doing some qualitative data information, doing some community engagement meetings at the first quarter of next year with constituents from your city and asking them what's important to them as they think about broadband and internet access in their area. Lastly, we're also thinking about coordination to make sure that we're all coordinated across the different cities as we think about broadband and that we're not duplicating assets and efforts. In terms of the timeline, this is the timeline over the next 6 or 7 months or so. What we're hoping to end up at the end of this timeline is a regional strategic plan for broadband. And in that plan, there'll be several pages dedicated to Port Hueneme and your history and plan when it comes to broadband and how we can make sure that you're teed up and ready for a lot of these broadband funding opportunities as they come. Closer on the left side here of the timeline, we've been, as I mentioned, doing a lot of these working group meetings. And so we're planning to meet next week and to talk about how to get the speed testing out, how to make sure that the community is aware of these conversations about broadband and how to bring them into that at the beginning of next year. And as I mentioned earlier, we hope to come back at some point next year as well to give you an update on how that data collection is progressing. In terms of outcomes, what we're hoping to be able to offer you is that through this strategy, as I mentioned, the strategic plan that we'll be creating, which will help you all identify some of the partnerships that would be able to support you as you're thinking about broadband, also thinking about mapping and how we can use the data that we're collecting to identify which areas are underserved. How do we make sure that we're serving those areas firstly? And then lastly, most important to say is that we're not asking for any money. We're just asking for participation and engagement in this process, which we already have, as I mentioned. One of your staff has been participating in these working group meetings, but really it's just about communication and information sharing at this point, and we're hoping that that will have you ready for a lot of the funding opportunities that will be coming in the next year or two from broadband. And that's it. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions?
I do have a question. So, thank you for your presentation. Hi, Bill. How are you? Good to see you. So Broadband Consortium Pacific Coast, who, are you working with the EDC? Is that who's
Yes.
hired you to do this? Okay.
Yeah, so I actually work for the EDC directly, but
I know
it's
15
complicated.
was-
Yeah.
All right, great. Okay, and you definitely are working then with the counties.
Yes. Yeah, so the county is represented in our working group. So we have all the cities in the county.
Yeah, they have a mile something program. What do you know?
The middle mile?
Middle mile program. So is that still
Mm-hmm.
what they're calling it?
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
thank you. No more questions.
Questions? All right. I guess I guess that means we understand it. Thank you, Vivian and Bill, for the presentation.
Great, thank you.
And no action. We're now going to move on to the consent calendar, and which will be enacted in one motion unless a council member has a request to remove an item for discussion. I was thinking we discuss council meeting schedule. I would just want to pick your guys' brains. See how. Yeah. So can we pull number 10? Is there any other ones that would like to get pulled?
Yes, Mayor. Can we pull 11 and 12 as well?
Okay, so let's go ahead and approve 6, 7, 8, and 9. Can I get a second?
Second.
Right. Can we have a vote to approve 6, 7, 8, and 9?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
So for number 10, I just wanted to ask the question, can we change the time from like say 6:30 to like 5:30 or 6 o'clock? Maybe make it a little bit earlier. Is that a possible?
The council has the ability to change the time of the meeting if the council agrees.
If we were to move the time earlier, how would that affect staff in terms of preparation? What's the ideal time for staff is my question.
The only thing I would suggest is that would obligate us to pass ordinances to move the timeframes for other meetings as well, including PHWA to accommodate that.
What time does PHWA usually meet?
4.
4:30? And they're usually done at
It depends. If there's a closed session, they run right up till city council.
6:30? Okay. So I guess my question for council is, do we think that 6:30 is still a good time?
I do. Yeah, I would be concerned, if I may, I would be concerned also about community participation. Yeah, a lot of people work till 5:36, and those who come to our meetings, it might have an impact on them and their ability to attend meetings.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to see how you all felt. Okay. I'm good on 10.
I believe we did have a question about changing the day, but I'm still fine with Mondays.
Yeah, no, I like Mondays. Yeah, can,
Could you speak to in the mic,
yeah,
please?
she wants to know if we should just move to approve item number
Okay.
10. I was gonna suggest we can approve them maybe at the end, or Kevin, can you direct this? Do we approve one at a time, or do we, as we go, one at a time, or?
Since they're pulled individually, my recommendation would be to approve individually as well.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve item number 10, city meeting schedule.
Second.
Aye.
Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Sorry.
And then Councilmember Martha McQueen Lejean, you wanted to pull 11 and 12?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I think the question was answered somewhat in a follow-up communication, but for the 80,000 for the demolition, can you just tell us what the time frame is for recovering of funds?
Sort of. I think it depends. It could take quite a while, and just so everybody understands, maybe people watching at home. So when there's like a nuisance situation and the city has to go through the process, obtain warrants, demolish a property, we can put a lien on the property, and then typically when something happens, we can get reimbursed, whether that's, the estate of the person sells the property or what have you. But usually there's some sort of like triggering event, but it can take years to potentially get back. We only do this in extreme situations, and we recommended it in this situation because we think this is an extreme situation. A residence was already hazardous, and then it caught fire, and then we've had issues with people sneaking in the area and everything. So we do think this is the situation that justifies putting that effort in to take care of the problem, but it may be years before we get reimbursed for it.
Can you just, did you say that we can put a lien or we can't?
We
put a lien?
can.
Can.
Affirmatively, yes, we can put a lien on the property.
So it says demolition. Are you talking about demolishing the entire house?
Correct.
It's that bad?
Yes.
Wow.
So maybe in future, this rarely happens. I think in my history on the council, I've never seen an item like this come before us for approval. And I think in the future, if this happens again, hopefully not, that a picture be attached. I went on Google Earth and pulled up a picture of this location, and from the outside, you can't tell that it's a nuisance property.
Okay.
So, as they say, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and it would just give us a better clarity on the problems.
For sure. We could do that. Yeah, I would say these don't happen very often. I think I've had one every 5 years or so. So that's probably about right.
So is there a way to avoid a complete demolition? I mean, I know there's house flippers that come out and, will reduce it to studs and all that and then rebuild. So how, have we looked at all the alternatives to achieve the most reasonable and cost effective? Because at some point, I imagine we're going to sell this property. I mean, we're not going to hold on to
I
it.
think we're never going to acquire title to this property.
So we're going to demolish it and then we're going to do what?
Leave it demolished, and the property is going to reside with the property owner. We're
And
going
that's
to
and that's
record.
going to make the neighborhood better.
It's not an attractive nuisance to the homeless people who or the unhoused that go to such properties.
How do we make this property? I mean, it's a beautiful lot. Thank you for the picture. I mean, it's a really nice lot. It's a big lot. I mean, how do we get somebody in that business interested to make it a unit for housing?
I would imagine you can have people contact the property owner and see if that person is willing to sell. But as of this moment, it's private property, and there is no mechanism for the city to gain title to it.
So we're just going to go in, bulldoze the house, and then say, put up a tent, sir? Or is somebody living there?
It's red tag, property's red tagged at this at this
So
point.
nobody's living there.
Nobody is legally living there. One of the comment the city attorney made about, attractive nuisances, part of the problem is we get calls that people are sneaking into the property. So that's one of the challenges.
And my understanding is the property is structurally unsound. It's unsafe for anybody to be inside of it.
Right, but I just trying to understand the big picture here. Are we going to, well, I mean, we're going to demolish it, remove the trees, and then say this property will no longer be used for bad things? I mean, people are sleeping on sidewalks these days.
Yeah, I think the optimal situation, it would be what you were saying, is if somebody, if the property owner was at all responsible for the property, that would be the optimal situation. The challenge is they haven't been. And to the point of originally just being a small minor nuisance and then catching fire, red tagging the property, and now people sneaking into the property and they're not doing anything about
Is there
it.
conversations with the owner of the property?
The owners has not been responsive for the last, I think it was 2 years. Is
2021.
yeah, since
Is it-
2021.
Is there an elderly person, dementia, or is there any reason to understand what's going on behind this closed door?
About once every, like we said, once every few years, once every 4 or 5 years, you come across a situation where a person just is not responsible for their property. And I don't
Person
know
alive?
I don't know that there's like one, consistent reason for that, but you have that. And like you said, you'd think real estate is not cheap, and you'd think that they would see the value of taking care of the property. But in this case, I think we've seen it's an extreme case where they don't understand that, and they aren't treating the property that
I'm
way.
kind of fascinated by the fact that somebody could own a really valuable piece of property and not engage in a conversation. So what it sounds like, nobody has spoken to the owner.
Since
Nobody has
2021.
gotten a written response from an attorney or a trust or anything. It's just a property that's sitting there. Is anyone coming in and out of the property?
My understanding is that there were communications with the owner. The owner decided to discontinue communications. There was another entity or outside interest that was interested in securing the property and had communicated with Mr. Stewart. That communication fell through. And at this point, we were left with the only code enforcement or property option at our disposal is demolition. Unless, of course, there's a number of options. Somebody could come in and manage to get contact with the owner to purchase the property, and they could come to terms, and then they could rehabilitate the property. The city could use its eminent domain powers and acquire the property for a public purpose.
I thought we didn't have that ability anymore.
We're a government. We have power of eminent domain.
I don't know, it just seems bizarre. So I would
It is.
hope that that we could find a way to not tear it down, but find a way to sell it. I don't know.
It's not ours to sell.
Well, I was going to say, I
But
think
it's ours to tear down.
It's ours to tear down. Think of it as a police action. It's ours to tear down to eliminate the nuisance. The property never changes hands. We're getting a warrant to go in and do that. A court has determined that probable cause exists, that this is a
Yeah.
nuisance. And so think of it more of a police action than a code enforcement action, and it makes a little bit more sense.
I could hear some of our residents bringing up a hotel that we have the same problem with, you know.
That one, the owner hasn't stopped talking to us since 2021.
Okay, are there any other questions? Is there a motion?
I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 4-1. Councilmember Gama voting no.
And Councilmember Martha McQueen Lejean, what was your question for
Number 12.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My question is, I just want to make sure that I understand in changing the value of the change order amendments. Are we talking, are we still staying within the estimate dollar amount?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, and so the intent here, it's not to change anything related to the budget. It's simply that there are several items that are that exceed $25,000. And in normal projects, we would then go through processes and bring the item back to council and get it approved. But because this is the Bubbling Springs project that has a grant deadline hanging over us, we're asking the council to sort of to authorize staff to be able to approve those as long as we are still within budget. So
Thank you.
Would you like to make a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Now, tonight, we don't have any public hearings, but we do have some public items. So item number 13, potential prohibition of smoking in multi-unit residence. Will staff please present the report?
thank you. So this item is on the agenda stemming from last meeting's conversation. You may recall, and I think we have our speakers here today, we had several speakers provide information to the council at our November 20th meeting, giving information about cities that had adopted prohibitions against smoking in multi-unit residences and information on what had been prohibited in some of those cities. And so at the end of the council meeting, the council requested that the item be placed back on an agenda. And so we are bringing the item back at this point. An ordinance has not been prepared. We aren't necessarily at the point to adopt an ordinance, but essentially what we're looking for is this item is intended to allow the council to discuss the consideration of a prohibition and then to provide direction to the staff regarding whether to draft an ordinance prohibiting smoking in multi-unit residences. We spent a little bit of time over the last couple weeks reaching out to Moore Park. We're going to get more information probably in the next couple of weeks. With holidays, we were only able to talk to maybe one person very briefly. So we hope to get more information on that, but we did look at Moore Park. We got some copies of their staff reports. Moore Park is the other Ventura County city that's adopted such a prohibition. So we looked at what they've done and looked at their reports. So our staff report includes some information noting that Moore Park adopted their ordinance in 2017. It was intended to be a broad prohibition of smoking in apartment units, including balconies, patios, porches, and decks. And essentially, the challenge with these ordinances typically are enforcement, and how do you enforce action within somebody's own dwelling. And so we looked at how Moore Park dealt with that, and Moore Park included language in their ordinance requiring the landlords of properties to have a smoking prohibition in leases that then essentially the landlord or tenant, a neighboring tenant could ask the landlord to enforce that, or the landlord could enforce that as part of their lease. And so it's not necessarily something that the city had to enforce, but it was something on the books that the landlord or other tenants could enforce. So if we proceed with the prohibition, we would be reaching out to Moore Park and getting more information on that, more information on if they've ever had to enforce it, what that has been like. We weren't able to get all that information prior to today, but a couple more points about both something that Moore Park did that we recommend, and then also about enforcement. The first, Moore Park, when they adopted their ordinance, they actually did outreach to all of their apartment complex owners. They only have 7. We have quite a bit more, so it would probably take a little more effort. I think they just spent a couple months reaching out to the apartment complexes, and they asked the apartment owners and managers whether they supported the potential smoking ban. Interestingly, because I didn't expect that there would be unanimous support, but they actually found that there was unanimous support amongst those people in Moore Park. I think 6 of the 7 responded, and they all responded positively. The 7th didn't respond, but they never got any sort of complaint or anything from them. And so from staff, we were sort of talking that through, and we think because we have so many more complexes that may be impacted, we recommended that the city council consider that as a next step to provide that direction for us to reach out to those people in our community and get the responses, and we can come back with a report on that, since they will likely also be the people having to do sort of that first line of enforcement on the ordinance. And then last, just because it ties perfectly into the conversation we just had, when we're talking about enforcement of this type of prohibition, um, most of the time, it's probably going to be a letter from their landlord, maybe at most, hopefully, a letter from the city. But we did talk through, if it had to go further than that. I think that last report we just talked about, where we are having to get warrants and everything else to abate a nuisance, that would be a worst case scenario. Those abatement warrants get fairly expensive. So I think as we sort of go through the process, our biggest recommendation would be to try to focus on the ways to work with the property owners and the tenants to focus on enforcement. The city probably doesn't have the resources to enforce an ordinance like this aggressively. And so that's something that we'll be talking about and trying to build into any ordinance that's considered if we move forward with an ordinance. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions. And as the mayor mentioned, the recommendation is to consider options and provide direction.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. City Manager, for the report. Does, I have a few questions and then a comment. Does the building code distinguish between multi-unit residences and apartment buildings? Because I feel like we're using those terms interchangeably.
I'm not sure if the building code does, but I think for our purposes, as we draft an ordinance, we should be clear about which we intend it to be.
Mhm.
Similarly, there were a couple issues that came up as we were talking, and things like different types of smoke. Also, we might want to think about what we're trying to prohibit. Is it cigarette? Is it vape? Is it cannabis? Is it all those different things? But generally, we were talking about a multi-unit residence prohibition that could be narrowed down into just apartments if that's
Okay, so a
requested.
multi-unit residence then could imply apartment buildings, because
Mhm.
I think at the last meeting, it wasn't clear, but in the staff report, it does say that the city has adopted a prohibition of smoking in public places, which includes common areas in apartment buildings.
Correct, and that's common areas, not the individual units. That's the distinction between what's requested.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Somebody.
So the current prohibition that we have includes common areas, but it doesn't include the individual units, which is
Right.
what's being requested.
So the request then is to prohibit smoking within a person's private residence.
Such as an apartment unit,
Okay, because of shared attics, shared walls and
vents,
everything.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. See if I had any more
So
questions.
this doesn't include like people's regular houses and townhomes, such.
It wouldn't include single-family residences. I think, and the city attorney will correct me if I'm wrong. I think whether it applies to other multi-unit dwelling units would be something that the council could provide direction on for an ordinance.
Right. There's no reason why it couldn't apply to townhomes or anything that has a shared wall with another unit. The issue is if council is going to regulate this as a health and safety concern and say that air quality is important, the distinction between privately owned or rented kind of loses its meaning. And so there's no reason why this couldn't apply to townhomes. There's no reason why you couldn't exempt townhomes. The only problem that we would have would be logical consistency.
I still had another question. Is that okay? Thank you, Mayor. Uh, Also, in the staff report, you mentioned, the time that it would entail to survey apartment owners and managers, and it's stated here that it would be substantial. Do we know what the costs were for Moore Park, and is there any way we can extrapolate from there what those estimated costs might be, the time and the costs?
Yeah, more parks were very minimal because of
The
the
numbers.
small number. I want to
Mhm.
say that they said they had 7 complexes, and I thought their staff report estimated $10,000 or something along those lines, of effort and resources and things. I think for us, we expect the effort to be much more significant, and um, also, if we were to expand this potentially to asking condo complexes, townhome complexes, uh, that's just increasing the amount of outreach we'd have to
Right.
do. So, um, uh, positively, we started to sort of build that network where we do have pretty fairly easy ways to try to reach out to some of the complexes and the associations in town. So it may not, that might be something in our favor, but to try to go out and reach out to each of them, we expect to take some time. I think we estimated 40 to 80 hours of like one staff person's
Yeah, I
time
see
to
that
do
in
that.
the
Yeah.
report. So, should the council recommend this item that we move forward, that would be something that you would come back with more information on.
Yes,
On the
I would
costs.
estimate that it would probably be to do the outreach, and then also reach out to Moore Park, meet with the relevant staff there, find out the pros and cons or any pitfalls that they've run into or any recommendations they have. We were estimating that we're probably talking, 4 to 6 months process.
And what have you found in terms of enforcement? Should we move forward on this? What would be the issues surrounding enforcement? What would that look like?
Yeah, from everything we could find, and again, we wanted to confirm this with Moore Park, but from what we could find, they stated during their adoption that the intent was not for it to be enforced by the city. The intent was to be able to give the landlords the ability to require it of their tenants, and then kind of that backing for the landlords to enforce it. Um, Without doing much research, and we'll come back with more, that is likely our recommendation as well. We just talked about the last item that cost $80,000 to enforce a nuisance. I've had a couple other nuisances I've had to get abatement warrants on, and just the abatement warrant, the city attorney's time to go, somebody's got to go to the county and have a judge sign off on a warrant, then you have to go out and enforce it, hire a crew, all that kind of stuff. I would say the cheapest I've seen that done is probably $20,000. And we just saw on the last item, it was an $80,000 abatement process. So if we were going to enforce it to that level, it would be unsustainable in our budget. So I think that's likely why Moore Park chose the path they did, and it seems like a reasonable path for us to look at.
Any more questions?
I'd just like to make a couple comments. So secondhand cigarette smoke has zero public benefit. And we did previously say you can't smoke on the beach and other public places. So there is a little bit of a contradiction there. We told people, yeah, smoke to your heart's content, but go inside. And I had several years ago when I lived at Beachport Villas, I had a place there. I had a common wall with some neighbors that smoked heavily, and I had to resort to walling off the vent in the bathroom because that's where the smoke was coming from, and you could still smell it. And I wasn't gonna go ask my neighbors. They're really nice people to quit smoking because they'd clearly been smoking their entire life, and that was what they do. But there's more than just multi-unit apartment houses that have common walls that are affected by secondhand smoke. And so if we're going to do this, I would hope that most people are reasonable. In other words, if the smoking was to a point that it was very bothersome, I would hope and expect that most people, upon interacting with their neighbor, would make some changes and try to make it better. You know, but in researching this thing, I've come to realize that, you know, there's a lot of like diesel exhaust emissions are everywhere in the city of Port Hueneme because of the port. And there's a big public benefit to having all that economic activity. But there's also the risk and the secondhand port exhaust emissions. So, you know, if we're going to seriously look at this from a health perspective, then I think we owe it to our community to look at the exhaust and the emissions coming from the port and what kind of mitigation can we seek.
Did you
help
have a
us with
question
that.
though right now?
And my question is, how far are we going to go with this? Because there's more common walls than you think. In fact, I live in Surfside Village and I have a common wall with my neighbor, which is kind of weird, but there's like 6 houses in our neighborhood that have a common wall. So I think we're going to have to really think about moving forward. I think most people will do the reasonable thing, and how are we going to decide where to stop because of the common walls?
Yeah, and the what I would note is I think Moore Park, who I think again is the one Ventura County city who's done this and who we are looking to is sort of the model. Theirs was specifically on apartment complexes, and so as we start to do the research, that's probably going to be the focus. But it is ultimately the council's decision on whether to proceed with that or to look at an alternative. So.
Are there any other questions?
So the motivation for this is health and wellness to make a situation more healthier or less harmful.
That's my understanding, and I think we have some speakers who will inform us of that.
All right, let's move on to public comments. Madam Clerk, how many public comments do we have tonight?
We have 10 in-person public comments, and then we have 2 written comments for this item.
Start with the,
Do we, excuse me, a point of order, do we want to limit the time on the?
It's at the mayor's discretion.
yeah, no, we're just gonna hear them out.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call up the first one. Gabe Turan.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, city manager, city staff, and members of the public. My name is Gabe Turan. I'm a resident of the city of Oxnard. I'm here to speak to you in a professional capacity tonight. I have spent the last 20 years of my career as a health and prevention and community advocate and a youth advocate. And seeing this item before us tonight with the young people from Future Leaders of America bringing this forward is absolutely commendable, and I commend you all for bringing it forward for consideration. In the time that I have, I just want to point out a few things. Smoking rates in the 1990s, which I think everyone up here and myself were around in the 1990s, were 25% of adults. 1 in 4 people smoked regularly. Today in 2023, it's hovering about 1 in 10 people are regular smokers as adults. And there's plenty of evidence to show the harm that tobacco use has caused to communities, especially communities of color. And second and third hand smoking exposure is absolutely, there's lots of research behind it and what it has done to cause harm, especially to spouses, kids, and pets. But when we look at third hand exposure for landlords, there's an added expense of cleanup when a smoker moves out of a unit and it has to be remediated. And those chemicals that are left behind are still exposed to new tenants if it's not done properly. As far as enforcement, I hope you'll consider that Cabrillo Economic Development Corporation has numerous properties around the around the county, and have successfully had smoke-free properties for decades. And I've seen folks at Cabrillo properties, a handful of people who go out to the public sidewalk to smoke. Not even in the parking lot can they smoke. And so that's something for consideration as far as enforcement goes. Costs, I hope, can be mitigated if you consider in the future a tobacco retail licensing ordinance, which would have your retailers pitch in through a permitting fee to be able to have the privilege of selling tobacco in your city and can pay for an enforcement officer. As time and normalization goes on, though, I hope that you can see that it's likely that costs will decline over time. The Public Health Law Center likely has model ordinances for you to consider as well. Lastly, the young people who are here in front of you are absolutely the future of Hueneme and Oxnard and West County and all of Ventura County. And this is something they're calling upon for your consideration. I hope that as you hear them out tonight in their comments, that you'll see that this is something that is important to them. They're bringing forward as they have a vision for the future. And I tell all young people when I've worked with them these last 20 years, your community is the way it is because somebody left it like that for you. And whether it was something they did or something they didn't do, this is how it was left. What are you going to do to make it for the people who follow you? And I commend these young people for being here tonight to bring this forward. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Hayden Styles, and then after it would be Arely Garcia.
Good evening, council members. My name is Hayden Stiles, and I'm a student at Hueneme High School and treasurer for Port Hueneme FLA Student Council. I'm here again to urge you to work towards enacting a smoke-free multi-unit housing. We appreciate you discussing the issue. We know that this is a complex process, but we know, like Port Hueneme, like other cities, has the potential of passing an ordinance that will benefit the overall health of its residents. We have all mentioned the dangers of exposures to second and third hand smoke, but other than protecting the health of Port Hueneme residents, passing this ordinance can help property owners reduce costs, risks, and liabilities. We believe that this is a positive thing as it makes multi-unit housing more desirable to live in. Residents with health issues that are caused by or worsened by exposure to secondhand smoke may pursue legal action against property owners or managers if they don't appropriately take steps to resolve the problem. An ordinance like this will protect both the tenant and the property owner. For these reasons, we hope that you do what's right for multi-unit residents and enact a comprehensive multi-unit housing. Thank you.
Hello, council members. My name is Arely Garcia. I am the president of the Future Leaders of America Student Council for the Port Hueneme region. I'm here again to express my support for a smoke-free multi-unit housing policy. Like I mentioned before, this is an issue that not only affects residents, but also our pets. And if you guys are like me, you guys know that we would do anything to keep our pets safe. A multi-unit housing, residents like myself have shown concern for their pets because of the proven risk that they can be exposed to. Passing a smoke-free multi-unit housing policy would not just benefit us and our pets, but it also would benefit our city overall by making it a more desirable place to live. This would make residents want to stay and for other people to want to come live here. People are increasingly wanting to live in a smoke-free environment to protect themselves and their loved ones from the dangers of secondhand and third-hand smoke. So they are looking for smoke-free housing options that can provide them with a living environment that can allow their loved ones to grow and develop to their full potential. With this, I thank you for listening to us and taking into consideration the potential prohibition of smoking in multi-unit residencies. I hope that you guys continue to find a way for Port Hueneme to have a smoke-free living environments. Thank you for your time.
Estrella Garcia, and then Daniel Gonzalez.
Good evening, council members. My name is Estrella Garcia. I am the vice president of the Port Hueneme Future Leaders of America Student Council. I'm here again to voice my support for a comprehensive smoke-free multi-unit housing policy. First of all, I would like to thank you for listening to us and taking into consideration this issue and putting it on the agenda. It's incredible to see the amount of young people consuming tobacco products these days. In 2023, 10% of middle and high school students, that is 2.8 million students, reported current use of any tobacco product. It is hard to believe that these young souls are becoming addicted to such a dangerous product. This is why I support a smoke-free multi-unit housing policy, to create and promote a healthier community with healthier habits. I come here again to encourage you to think about the young people in your families, your loved ones, and all the youth in our city that you represent. A prohibition of smoking in multi-unit residence will positively impact those young ones. It is not fair for them to suffer the consequences of others smoking. So with that, I just want to encourage you to take all the means necessary for Port Hueneme residents to have a healthy smoke-free home. Thank you.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Jana Gonzalez. I'm the organizing director with Future Leaders of America. I'm here to thank you all for putting smoke-free multi-unit housing on tonight's agenda, as well as taking the time to look for potential options for prohibiting smoking in multi-unit housing. We hope that tonight you will take action in addressing this issue that affects all current and future renters and their families. When we talk about prohibiting smoke, we mean all smoke, including cannabis. As mentioned previously, there is no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke, and an estimated 2 out of every 5 children are exposed to secondhand smoke in the United States. Secondhand smoke in multi-unit housing disproportionately affects Latinx and low-income communities and their families, who make up the majority of occupants living in multi-unit housing complexes, specifically here in Port Hueneme. I want to stress that smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinances aren't only beneficial to our community members' health, but also to property owners. A recent study found that costs in properties that allow smoking everywhere were nearly double that of smoking-related costs incurred at smoke-free properties. An estimated 7,600 smoking-related fires occur in residential buildings each year in the United States. Several statewide surveys have also demonstrated that as many as 78% of residents, including smokers, would choose to live in a smoke-free complex. Let us act in the best interest of our residents by ensuring our community, children, and those most vulnerable are kept safe from second and third-hand smoke. Thank you.
Megan Salas, and then Jesselyn Banos.
Good evening, Council. My name is Megan Salas, and I'm the Oxnard Youth Organizers for Future Leaders of America. Once again, I just want to thank you for taking the time and for actually letting us speak tonight and for putting this on the agenda. I know this is something that our youth have been working strongly on, so we're really happy to be back here. The one thing that I do hope that Council will keep an open mind is to this topic, as I know this is something a little new, and I hope that you guys can really just see the perspective of those that are affected by it. Like, we do have youth here specifically that live in Port Hueneme, that live in a multi-unit housing residence. So this is without a doubt not an issue that can be resolved overnight, but I hope that by having this discussion that we can continue to pave the way for Port Hueneme to provide clean air for all of its residents. I actually was in Moore Park yesterday, and I love Moore Park, so I'm really glad to hear that you guys are going to be in talks to see how they were able to implement that as well. I also wanted to mention that as of October 1st, 2023, there are 81 municipalities in California that have enacted a law at the county or city level that prohibits smoking in 100% of private units of rental multi-unit housing properties. So it would be remarkable to see Port Hueneme added to this list of cities that places this as a priority. Port Hueneme does contain dozens of apartment complexes, so implementing this would be time-consuming. However, I really think that anything in life worth having is worth working for. So I believe that clean air is so worth fighting for, and I hope that the city can agree to that as well. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, council members. My name is Jesselyn Banos. I am the secretary for the FLA Student Council for the Port Hueneme region. I am here to support my support for this multi-unit housing smoke-free policy. Just like my peers have said about second and third-hand smoke, that there is no safe contamination that we be exposed to. It shows that we do get lasting life diseases about this. As I mentioned in the last meeting, I am exposed to daily They lead to second and third hand smoke due to my parents' business being so close to two smoke shops. Many students like myself try to avoid these substances and environments because we want to be far in life or we want to deal with the addiction that runs in families. We have dreams and goals that we want to accomplish, and those goals may be threatened due to the health issues that we are exposed to, like second or third hand smoke. I would like to be able to go to home and feel safe from smoke and not being able to smell or even see people smoking around my home. It is most difficult for people living in multi-unit housing to avoid exposure to second and third hand smoke if they are exposed to it outside of home and it at home. We thank you for taking into discussion this issue. If the multi-unit housing policy is passed, you'll be helping improve the city and the people's quality of life now and into the future of future generations. Thank you.
Candy Bonos, and then Javier Garnica.
Dear council members, good afternoon. My name is Candy Banos, and I am the Communication Director of Port Hueneme Region for Future Leaders of America Student Council. I'm here today to thank you for taking into discussion the potential prohibition of smoking in multi-unit housing. And with that, I want to express my support of a comprehensive smoke-free multi-unit housing policy. I am concerned about the harm the most vulnerable in our community face against second and third hand smoke, which includes our environment. Port Hueneme is known for being close to the beach. Families enjoying the beach with picnics or fishing in the pier. Tobacco is not just an issue that concerns residents that live in multi-unit housing, but all Port Hueneme residents as a whole. Passing a smoke-free ordinance will not only protect individuals, but also promote a healthier and more vibrant community that will develop not just in multi-unit residents, but on the rest of Port Hueneme. Taking action on a smoke-free multi-unit housing is not just a step forward, a healthier living environment, but a commitment to the health of all residents. We hope and encourage you to continue to work with the best for the health of Port Hueneme residents. Thank you.
Hello, council members. My name is Javier Garnica. I am the Port Hueneme Youth Organizer with Future Leaders of America. First of all, I want to thank you for listening to us and taking into action on a potential prohibition of smoking in multi-unit residences. We all understand that passing an ordinance like this can be a complex process, as y'all have already mentioned. We understand that every city is different and that potential costs and challenges to enforcement may arise. But despite all those challenges, the city of Port Hueneme has the potential, or at least we all believe that the city of Port Hueneme has the potential to pass a comprehensive smoke-free multi-unit housing policy, or at least begin working towards one. Other cities in California around the same size and population as Port Hueneme have already enacted a smoke-free multi-unit housing policy. Cities like Albany, Cudahy, and Millbrae are California cities with a population between 18,000 and 21,000 citizens. All these cities have enacted laws for 100% smoke-free multi-unit housing. According to the World Population Review, as of 2023, Port Hueneme, and correct me if I'm wrong, has a population of 21,380 residents. This means that if other cities our same size can enact a smoke-free multi-unit housing policy, then Port Hueneme can as well. Passing this ordinance would not just benefit residents, but also property owners, as by reducing cleaning and maintenance costs. Compared to smoke-free units, cleaning and refurbishing costs can be up to $3,000 more in units with heavy smoking. To end this, we just hope that you are willing to take on any challenge in order to provide our multi-unit housing residents with a healthy and safe living environment protected from the dangers of second and third-hand smoke. Thank you.
And thank you. Those were all the comment cards I had from your group. Okay, thank you. Luis Mendez.
Thank you. Good evening, Council Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council members, staff. My name is Luis Mendez. I am a resident here in Port Hueneme. I'm here today based on this topic, more of a, not against anti-smokers, but per se of where government or municipalities' role is when it comes to people's daily lives. Should you guys govern what people do in their own homes? Do you guys think it's right to take other people's rights away? They're all of age. You have to be 18 or over to smoke. It's legal. City revenue comes from sales taxes, from cannabis and from tobacco sales. So to be realistic, I think ordinances like this waste the city's money as they go into research to find if it's viable or not. Don't get me wrong, Future Leaders of America, I was one from 1992 to 1994, Wainimi High School. I like what you guys do, and it's great, and you guys should keep doing it. I just think when it comes to being an adult and living in this world, we shouldn't be told or directed by government entities how to live our life. I think with this city council, there's been a couple ordinances, in the past that have come up, like rent control, which kind of felt like it was people trying to control what homeowners can do with their property. Then there's that styrofoam ban issue where I felt like, hey, now they're trying to regulate small businesses in our county. And now with this smoking thing, I think it's trying to control individuals like myself or anybody else that smokes, whether it's cannabis, tobacco, or vape, how to live our lives. And I don't think that that's something that you guys should enter the realm in, because this is America. We are free, and we are adults to live and choose how we please. I think the city should better focus on things that, like, the homeless issue, mental health, things that affect the public at large. Focus on how we can generate revenue for the city, how to balance the budget, and how to add more money to the reserve accounts. Those are things that I think is the council's job, to run the city like a business and make money, or at least balance the budget so we're not in the negative, not tell people how to live and what to do with their lives. Thank you.
Can we hear the written comments, please,
Yes.
Madam Clerk?
Dear Mayor Martinez and City Council members, I am writing to encourage your consideration of a potential ordinance aimed at prohibiting smoking in multi-unit residents within the city of Port Hueneme. As a county supervisor representing this area and a concerned member of the community, I believe such a measure would have numerous positive effects on the health, safety, and well-being of all residents. First and foremost, implementing a smoking ban in multi-unit residences would contribute significantly to improved air quality at these locations. Secondhand smoke poses serious health risks, particularly for vulnerable populations such as the children, the elderly, and individuals with pre-existing health conditions. By enacting an ordinance of this type, the city of Port Hueneme would be taking a proactive step in protecting the health of its residents. Additionally, a smoking ban in multi-unit residents would enhance the overall quality of life for community members. It is well documented that exposure to secondhand smoke can lead to a range of health issues, from respiratory problems to cardiovascular diseases. I commend the youth who have been actively engaged in this issue, taking leadership in efforts to improve the quality of life in their communities. Their interest in shaping local policy through research, community outreach, and by approaching their local representatives is admirable, as I have seen firsthand. The decision to enact such a policy as you begin deliberation today requires careful consideration of various factors, including potential challenges. However, I firmly believe the long-term benefits of a smoke-free multi-unit residence policy far outweigh any initial concerns. Thank you for your dedication to serving our community. I appreciate your commitment to making Port Hueneme a healthier place to live. Sincerely, Vianney Lopez. My name is Hector Flores Garcia, and I am here today to express my concern about second and third-hand smoke in Port Hueneme. Without a smoke-free multi-unit housing policy, the city of Port Hueneme is ignoring the health and safety of its residents living within apartments and condominiums where families are affected by secondhand smoke. There is no safe amount of secondhand smoke exposure. The home is the main place where many children and adults breathe in secondhand and thirdhand smoke. For example, last year I witnessed a child who looked no older than 5 playing outside with their toy cars, and less than a foot away from them was a pile of cigarette butts. I know we talk a lot about the effects of secondhand smoke, but the exposure to third-hand smoke is a health concern worth mentioning as well. As for the city, I believe Port Hueneme would benefit from a smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance. With an ordinance, property managers can reduce the cleaning and maintenance costs and extra turnover time that comes with renovating a smoke-damaged unit. Compared to smoke-free units, cleaning and refurbishing costs can be up to $3,000 more in units with having smoking. This does not include the additional cost for loss of time and diminishing value. Nationally, fires caused by cigarette smoking result in over 300 million in property loss each year. An estimated 7,600 smoking-related fires occur in residential buildings each year in the U.S. People who smoke are not only the victims of smoking-related fires. 1 in 4 casualties of smoking-related fires are the children, friends, and neighbors of the smoker who caused the fire. All of this can be prevented with a smoke-free multi-unit housing policy. I ask that we consider the children and residents who are forced to inhale smoke in their own homes. Thank you for your time, and that concludes the public comment for this item.
Okay. So the recommendation is to receive a report on the city's current smoking prohibition and potential options to prohibit smoking in multi-unit residences and provide direction. May I have a motion and a second?
I'd like to make a motion that we receive this report and that we ask staff to move forward in researching a solution that strikes a balance so that people in our community can breathe healthy air. And I apologize if it sounded like I didn't want to hear from you. By limiting your time here, I've listened to the Future Leaders of America since I've been on this council. You are at our first council meeting, as a matter of fact, on this very issue. So it's not new to me, and I support your message. But I think we have to be practical about it, considering that we do have adopted cannabis in this community. So somewhere we have to have a balance. I'm sorry, that's not that's a long way around a motion, but I would like to make a motion that staff move forward and talk to our property owners and do a survey with
Okay.
our property owners.
And that was the recommendation originally, right? To go
Yes.
to apartment complexes, rental multi-units.
Yes.
And survey the community?
Yes, thank you.
Someone's gonna second that, I'll second that. Madam Clerk, can we have a vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Okay, we're gonna move on to item number 14, Port Hueneme Historical Museum update. Will staff please present the report?
For all our speakers, that means we'll keep the conversation going, so we'll see you again soon. And with that, thank you guys.
Thank you, guys.
And so with that, I'm asking, we have our museum committee and we have our 2 staff liaisons to the museum committee here, Charles Peretz, our deputy city manager, and Anna Hanley, our recreation manager. And so I'm going to ask them to give the background on this item that has been in process for a while, and we're looking to sort of kickstart it with a proposal. So.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, council members, members of the public that have remained. The report associated with agenda item number 14. Do you want me to wait?
She's gonna go in ahead and close the door. You may continue.
The staff report associated with agenda item number 14 provides an update on the museum rehabilitation efforts and seeks the council's approval to reduce the scope and budget associated with planned capital improvement projects at the museum. By way of quick review, in July of 2022, the city hosted a facilitated charrette consisting of museum volunteers, interested stakeholders, and representatives from city staff. The charrette focused on the development of a mission statement for the museum, finances that are necessary to support the ongoing operations of the museum, and facility improvements that resulted in a visioning document, which was presented to the council in September of that year. At the same time, council approved the formation of an ad hoc museum governance committee. Subsequently, items that had been stored at the museum were reviewed and selections were made for pop-up museum displays. Those temporary displays were included at 3 community events where members of the public had the opportunity to enjoy and experience those items, as well as obtain additional information about the displays and the museum itself. Committee members have relatively recently been onboarded as volunteers to facilitate their hands-on involvement with the committee and all of the steps associated with the rehabilitation efforts. Inventorying software has been selected, and a museum's collections policy is being drafted. And lastly, the summer speaker series was restarted. Other elements of the action plan that was included in that visioning document have not yet been implemented. That's in part due to other high priority tasks, including work associated with the Bubbling Springs project. In October of this year, we held a committee meeting. The city manager was present, and we held a discussion about the planned capital improvements and the potential for an alternative approach that would allow for an expedited reopening. The revised scope called for painting, some facility improvements, and a standalone portable exterior restroom. The committee's consensus was supportive of an alternative approach, and that is included in the recommendation this evening. The result would be a $50,000 savings in the capital project, and it would allow for the reopening of the museum in approximately 5 to 6 months. To be clear, work would continue after that opening, and a portion of the museum, which would be actively used for inventorying and archiving work, would be visible but would not be directly accessible to members of the public while the work was ongoing. So that concludes the overview. Again, the recommendation was to receive an update on the status of the rehabilitation efforts and to seek the council's support for a revised capital improvement scope and budget to reduce capital project FA 2302 from $75,000 to $25,000, resulting in a $50,000 savings.
Okay. Are there any questions for staff?
I have a
Yes.
question. So the recommendation, is it okay to speak? So the recommendation then is to approve an alternate approach to facilitate an earlier reopening of the museum and reduce costs. But this is not to say that later on, we're not going to go back and do some of the required construction and modifications and improvements.
That's correct, council member. Yeah, the original plan called for basically all of the steps of the action plan to be completed prior to the reopening. This would allow, as you just stated, for a more expeditious reopening, and then after that, additional work would continue.
Okay, thank you.
And this is something that the committee, the museum committee, agreed on?
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay.
The city manager was at our last meeting, introduced the concept, and the committee was supportive of this approach.
Okay.
I see Becky shaking her head back
And I
there.
think
Okay. Okay, then that's good news. Are there any other questions? No? Are there any public comments?
Yes. Tom McLean?
Okay, nice. I was wondering what those were.
Well, thanks for letting me come here and speak to your beautiful town. I've got to pull up a text from my son. So my name's Tom McLean. I'm a local comedian. I've been in Ventura County for about 15 years. Local comedian. I also organize the Seaside Sports Collectors Expo. Most importantly, I'm a dad. And so my son went on a trip to Catalina Island down in Long Beach, and he saw the Queen Mary, and he fell in love with this big giant ship. And it started this fascination and this love affair with old boats. With this kid, he's 14 years old, right? He's on the autism spectrum. He's got severe anxiety, and usually kind of like is usually pretty miserable when he's in a learning environment. But for whatever reason, that kind of took off with him. So he goes from the Queen Mary, started studying the Titanic, and on one of the Titanic's historic days, I don't remember which one it was, he called into a radio show that I was a part of that day. And he talked about the thing, and just so happened that our friend Councilman Gama happened to be in studio that day, and he said, "If your kid loves shipwrecks, there's one in Port Hueneme." And I think he would admit he didn't know anything about it other than there was a ship called La Janelle out there. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, this is kind of what she looks like today, right? So I told my son about it, and I took him and my daughter out there, And my son goes into this deep dive and starts learning all of this stuff about this ship that we have in our yard, or, our own backyard. It turns out this ship was had heroic efforts in World War II. It was a hospital ship on the beaches of Normandy during D-Day. It was also a transport ship that got a lot of our troops back and forth. Here, I should have. So for my Seaside Collectors Expo, we put together a big display. We have a whole bunch of stuff that we've collected. We've got like menus and passenger lists and all this different stuff from the lifespan of this ship. And this ship was involved with a really big heroic effort. I don't know if you've heard of the Yarmouth Castle. There was a fire out in the middle of the ocean. Captain Carl Brown, the captain of the Bahama Star is what it was called at that time, he saw the fire and went straight to it and was able to rescue like 400 or 500 people. So it's just got like a really great story, and it's right here in our own backyard. We could go visit it anytime, but nobody knows anything about it, right? So we put the display. It was a huge success at the Sports Collectors Expo, huger than most of the sports even. So it did really well. So I want to read this. So what we kind of want to do is bring it in to the Port Hueneme Museum for a little while as maybe a temporary display or whatever, right? Okay, let me read this story from my son. At first, the Bahama Star was just a shipwreck to me. I haven't been to a shipwreck before, so she was still a big deal even then. After doing research, I learned just how important this ship was. I was truly amazed by how she helped in the war and how much her efforts in the castle fire were heroic. She could have gone anywhere, but she chose here as her permanent home. Even now, she's providing us an amazing marine ecosystem. He uses words that are too big for me, so you gotta be patient with me. And a fun hangout spot for all of us. She did all these things, yet isn't recognized by some of our Ventura County residents. She's a pioneer, a hospital, and a hero. So thank you for letting me talk to you. We would love to bring our display to the museum. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have one more written public comment from Beverly Kelly.
Okay, yes.
The top priority for the museum committee and actual working board, not just a group of policymakers, has always been getting the building open to the public as quickly as possible. It has been closed now for nearly 4 years, and recent projections from the city added another couple of years on top of that. During our hiatus, we have been attempting to offer the public a museum without walls with the 3 pop-ups and the summer speaker series. Because Hueneme school teachers need a local history component and have asked for our help, we also wanted to gather materials for a museum in a trunk project to visit the schools in addition to starting the inventory project. Those plans have had to be put on indefinite hold while all board members completed fingerprinting and harassment training. So when City Manager Vega offered the possibility of just steam cleaning and repainting, we jumped at the chance to speed things up. While item 14 amounts to considerable cost savings as well as an accelerated opening date, please don't think that's the end of it as far as the city is concerned. Just as the city supports the library, it should also support important yet modest museum modernization projects as well. Here are some possible examples. Converting the storyboards into pull-up posters so we can free up space for rotating displays and make the museum more professional, or joining the Museum Alliance so that we can benefit from other museum expertise and are advertised in their brochure, or hiring an experienced part-time or consultant curator. This museum was once a community meeting place, a real treasure that has been sorely missed for far too long. Please bring it back better than ever. Beverly Kelly. And that concludes public comment.
Thank you. The recommendation is to receive an update on the status of the museum, rehabilitation efforts, and approve an alternate approach to facilitate the reopening of the museum, which includes a reduction to the scope and budget for capital improvement projects from FA 2302 from 75,000 to 25,000. May I have a motion and a second?
Move to approve. Second.
Any discussion?
I would just like to echo my friend Tom McLean, and I'm extremely grateful to his son because honestly, I didn't know anything other than La Janelle, and it's a place that we've all visited, and I have a big old piece of it in my backyard that I've had for 25 years. As a result of El Nino, it threw this 600-pound piece back, and the display that I helped Tom put together at the Collectors Expo was fascinating because we were able to bring life to this piece of metal. And, the very first government-sanctioned burial at sea happened on the Bahama Star. And it was also called the Boriquin, I believe, before that. And it got the nickname Lucky Star because of its efforts during the war effort. And so there's so much interesting information of the life of the La Janelle Bahama Star Boriquin that we hope that we could bring that to life in a display at the museum for a short amount of time, and maybe it could serve as the grand opening exhibit for this bona fide rehabilitation project. So it is it's so fascinating to see how one kid could get so much out of a piece of metal laying on a beach. And you know, I know that they spent a lot of time there, and it's been really interesting to learn about the many lives of the La Janelle. So really grateful that we're looking at this, and I hope that we could bring that to our museum as hopefully
All right, let's go ahead and take a vote. Madam Clerk?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to our last item, 15 Mural Artist Selection Subcommittee. Will staff please present the report?
Thank you. And I just have a brief report, and then I'll open it up if any members of the City Council's Mural Committee wants to add to that. Earlier this year, the City Council approved a mural project and approved the creation of a mural committee to start the process and start working towards developing the mural that would be kind of the city's first big public art project. And the city subsequently contracted with the Oxnard Performing Arts Center to develop a process and request for qualifications. That has been released and has gone out. The mural committee, following that release of the request for qualifications, have also recommended that the city council they've also recommended a subcommittee be created of 8 community members who preferably have an interest in the arts to perform the first review of artist submissions. And as part of that, it was recommended that the city council members each appoint a member to that subcommittee, with additional members of the subcommittee being appointed. So it's the 5 by council members, and then 1 by the port, 1 by the library, since the first mural is going to be at the library, and the other by the Ventura County Arts and Culture Manager. And so the items on the agenda to allow for discussion of that, and either somebody can be appointed to the committee tonight, or sort of expecting that it may take some time to think of the right person. The request is that by no later than December 31st, 2023, each council member submit a name to me to be included in the mural committee, mural artist selection subcommittee. With that, I don't know if either member of the mural committee wants to add anything to
Add
that.
anything?
No, thank you for that report, Mr. Vega. I just do have a question as to who they submit the names to. Do they submit them to you or to our clerk?
It would actually be myself and Community Development Director Tony Stewart, who's the staff person working with the mural. We agreed that if it goes to both of us, then we can make sure we can be double sure that it gets to where it needs to go. So.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. It's all in the report, and it's in the call for artists, which has been publicized on the OPEC website and reposted on Facebook and other social media platforms. So unless my colleagues have any questions, I have no other comments.
Are there any questions? All right, so are there any public comments regarding this item?
No public comments.
So the recommendation is to hear from the mural committee representative, and then each select one by no later than December 31st, 2023, an artistically inclined member of the Port Hueneme community to serve on a subcommittee to review qualifications for the mural artist. May I have a motion and a second?
Move to approve?
Any discussion? Okay.
All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can take a vote.
Okay. I thought he gave me the nod. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
To city manager comments and reports.
Thank you. I have a couple, and so just, yeah, to close that item out, please email us, Tony and I, the names by no later than December 31st, and we'll make sure they get where they need to go. So for the city managers comments and reports, a couple quick things. One is people may notice right now that the part of the Bubbling Springs walking path is closed, and it's actually for a positive reason. We are in year 2 of the creek clearing project. We started out this year's portion. We're only able to work on the creek for 40 days a year per our permits. So we've been trying to aim for November, basically start right away in November and get it done by about mid-December. Or actually this year it'll be probably by the end of December. So just to date, we've cleared 4,200 linear feet of the Bubbling Springs, and it's totaled 477 tons of material that has been removed from the creek. So that's continuing. If anybody's wondering why the trail's closed, and we expect to be done by the end of the month with this year's portion of the cleanup. So that one is a kudos to the Public Works Department for staying on it and making sure we're clearing that out each year. Additionally, somebody mentioned the styrofoam ban earlier today, and that was on our list to remind people about. And there's been some Facebook posts and some information is supposed to go out this month in the utility bills, reminding everybody that January 1st, 2024, that styrofoam prohibition goes into effect. And so we'll make sure we keep putting information out. But just as a reminder, that is going into effect. As hard as it is to believe that we're already at the end of the year, it's going into effect less than a month from now. So on January 1st. And then last, the December 18th, or I'm sorry, December 18th City Council meeting. We have the City Council reorganization, including recognition of the outgoing mayor and mayor pro tem and the election of the incoming mayor and mayor pro tem. Those will be on the agenda for December 18th. We also have a few items scheduled, public hearings for adoption of the landscape design guidelines and ordinance, which has been a project we've worked on for a long time with the committee. So that one we're excited to bring back on the 18th. We're also looking at the first of our community events that are to be jointly funded and coordinated, but mostly the joint funding of the Community Benefit Fund. The first event that we're going to propose is for February, called the Run for Your Heart 5K. And so we'll be bringing that and presenting it and getting hopefully getting the permit approved to move forward with that project. And then we'll also bring back the Beach Fest wrap up, and then proposed request for proposals that would go out. That item was recently presented to the CAC, but now it's going to be coming to the next step, coming to the council for review. And then we also have the economic development request for proposals that we put out. We actually ended up getting about 14 proposals. And so we've been reviewing those, and we're going to be recommending approval of one of those proposals and hiring somebody to get started on the economic development master plan. So busy, full meeting for the 18th, it looks like.
Are we allowed to ask a question regarding one of his comments?
Depends on the question.
Depends on the question, yeah.
Yeah, it depends on if it will engender discussion.
I'll just bring it up at comments then.
Okay. All right, council member reports and comments. Let's start off with Councilmember Martha McQueen LeJohn.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple of things. The Gold Coast Transit put out a press release regarding their 8th annual appearance of their holiday bus, which will be dashing through the streets until January the 7th. All rides aboard this bus are free. There is a hashtag CSEA Sun Greetings that you can use to follow the bus to where it's located or where it will be at, so that you could get your free ride. GCTD is asking as you ride the bus to take selfies. You can submit those selfies to the hashtag, and they will be picking a winner of those folks who are posting their photos. The winner will receive a 15-day pass, a 15 ride bus pass for sharing your photos. And so please look for the bus when you're around. You can actually go to Instagram or Facebook and track where it is. So you can take a look at it. If you were at the Oxnard's parade Saturday, you may have seen it. This is the picture. And it is adorned with our scenery from our coastline, our beautiful coastline here in Ventura County. So that is one. Then on for the Regional Defense Partnership, RDP, they'll will be participating in a special board meeting, which resulted from our June annual board meeting. So we'll be revisiting the RDP budget and annual requests for funding from cities and the county. So that is going to be December 7th. Another thing that came out of RDP was an article entitled Military Spouse Wins Court Fight on License Portability of First Court Decision on New Federal Provision. And that is an element that we put in our policy guidance, where military spouses can continue work toward their certification in a new state, or that certification can be transferred to a different state. And so we added that to our policy and procedures this year. So this was one decision that was made. Let's just read this. Federal judge sided with military spouse in Texas, saying that by federal law, Texas education officials must accept her school counseling licensures from Ohio and Missouri. And this was in the Military Times. It says when the military family moved to Laughlin Air Force Base, Texas, the state refused to accept her out-of-state license. The judge ruled that it was a violation of the new provision of the Service Member Civil Release Act, requiring states to provide reciprocity in accepting those occupational licenses. So that's a good thing. And finally, just want to share that the VCTC, we have an appointment, a commissioner to the MetroLink, and that individual has resigned. So they're looking for another commissioner to serve as the MetroLink alternative commissioner. And so one of the things that came up is that the meetings are in LA, and so they became, I think, more reoccurring than the individual thought. And so on the bright side, you can get on the MetroLink and go to the MetroLink meeting in LA if you needed to. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gama?
Yes, really pleased with Wainimi Beach cleanup. We're continuing every Saturday, and it's just pretty amazing that the effort, little bit each week, has really paid off big for Wainimi Beach. However, Wainimi Beach is adjoined by Ormond Beach, and the Ormond Lagoon continues to be the producer of rubbish that makes it onto Wainimi Beach and causes problems. I want to commend the city of Oxnard for recently clearing out the shanty town on McWayne and Perkins Road. I don't know how many dumpsters. It was probably 20, 40 footers, maybe more. I don't know. But as before, we are now seeing the encampments reemerge, and this time they're emerging closer to the city of the border between Wainimi and the city of Oxnard, and they're camping on the island, the Ormond Lagoon Island, and they're using a boat to cross into Wainimi and come in and cause damage and environmental disregard. And I'm just concerned that we're just going to sit back and watch what seems to happen on a 2-year cycle every 2 years is 2015, 2017, 2019, 2021, 2023. It seems like every 2 years, City of Oxnard cleans all these people out and they leave all kinds of rubbish behind. So I just hope that we could try and get a dialogue, try to come up with a plan that works so that we could protect the environment where Ormond and Wainimi Beach meet. In regards to the reed clearing, Mr. City Manager, I noticed that when they pull the reeds out, it's accelerating erosion, and that erosion has been occurring for many years. And in some instances, it's exposed large portions of the root structure of some very large trees. And is there a way for, and I know there's a word and I can't remember the word, but is there a way for us to readdress the erosion by putting dirt, filling in with dirt the portions that have eroded away? And so what I noticed today is when they scoop out the reeds, they're also scooping out a substantial amount of dirt. And maybe we could, I don't know, try to come up with an environmentally sound way of protecting the banks of Bubbling Springs, particularly between Wainimi Road and the beach, because the erosion is kind of severe. And then got a Beacon meeting that's coming up on this Friday. I'm really excited to participate there. Just leave it at that. I'm drawing a blank, tired.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Okay, thank you, Mayor Martinez. I've attended some meetings I haven't been to in a while, only because they haven't held these meetings. They're like quarterly meetings. The Ventura Regional Energy Alliance, which is a group that I chair. And this was a meeting of the worker bees, so to speak, the representatives from various agencies, including the port and the cities and the county and other organizations who are implementing clean energy measures for their respective organizations. And I would like to ask if we could ensure that next time we have a city representative there to attend on our behalf. I chair those meetings, but it would be nice to hear from whoever is responsible for implementing our clean energy program here in Fort Wainimi. We want to make sure that we're not
I'll look,
absent with that.
yeah, I'll look into it. I thought we had a representative who was attending, but there are quite a few committees. So if we don't, that's something we can bring back and consider. But I think there is somebody who is supposed to represent that. So
Okay,
we'll
that
track
would be
it.
good because there's so many good examples and model programs going on countywide. I think it's of interest to us to hear what else other people are doing that we might be able to emulate. I also wanted to thank staff and all the people who put effort into making the tree lighting ceremony a success. It was a great event, a real feel-good event. And I'm sorry I couldn't stay later, but I had another meeting I had to run to. But and it's unfortunate we didn't get a group council picture together. So we got to make sure we do that next year. But I just want to extend my gratitude to staff for all their hard work in making that happen. I also attended a Southern California Edison Advisory Committee meeting, which is a quarterly meeting. This week, I'll be attending on Thursday, Southern California Association of Governments Economic Summit at downtown Los Angeles. And Councilwoman Martha McQueen Lejeune, may I ask you if you'd be available to attend VRSD on my behalf, in my place, Thursday. At the VRSD meeting, we will be recognizing Juliet Rodriguez, who has served 6 years as the clerk for VRSD. And I've asked our clerk to provide a certificate of appreciation for her service as she is retiring. So if you could pass our wishes on to her, wishes of good will and best wishes for her future, that would be great. Thank you. And I was really pleased also to hear about the licensing of the military wives. It's been something that's they've been working on for many, many years, and to see it finally come to fruition is really nice to hear. For those of you who don't know, December 3rd was John Sharkey Day, and in honor of John Sharkey Day, I'd like us to adjourn in his memory. If we could please do that, I'd appreciate it. And I'm sure Beverly would as well. And I also plan on attending Friday's Beacon meeting. That's all I have. Thank you.
I'll keep it short and sweet. I don't have anything to report on. I have an EDC executive team meeting this week and a Boys and Girls Club of Oxnard and Port Hueneme meeting the following week. And otherwise, I just want to give a shout out to all staff who did a great job for the holiday event that we just had. So thank you.
Yes, it was a very nice tree lighting ceremony. And I just want to mention right after the tree lighting ceremony, I went to the Boys and Girls Club where they have the open gym, and I counted 40 people at the gym. I didn't get a chance to play. It was too packed. And I did go to the parade on Saturday, which I thought was nice. I thought maybe next year maybe we can have some representation, Hueneme representation at the Oxnard Parade. I want to mention that the Sister City meeting is on Wednesday at 6 p.m. Yeah,
Yes.
6 p.m. on Wednesday here. And then I also want to mention that we're waiting on the port to confirm a meeting, right? So we're just waiting on that. But
Yeah, and I talked to them today, and they're supposed to send us some dates.
okay, and that's about it. Any last comments? I think we're good. Yeah.
Tomorrow, yes.
Oh, that's right, and I'll be there too. I'll be at the county as well.
It was 10:45.
If I may say, I might be a bit late. I'm doing a presentation before the County Board of Supervisors tomorrow, a time certain at 10 a.m., recognizing Eric Bolt from National Weather Service for his service. And this is not, I'm not representing the city. It's has a retiree from the Ventura County Sheriff's Department.
Okay. So the next meeting is scheduled for Monday, December 18, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. I just want to mention, I think this might be my last. Oh, you know what? That's true. I think I'm already excited. Any requests for future agenda items? I don't have any.
Is there cities, could we research whether or not there's any safety ordinances for pedestrian at night? I notice a lot of pedestrians in this area wear dark clothes at night, and it's really dangerous. And I was wondering if there's any information out there about cities having an ordinance or a requirement where people wear reflective material or something, but it's just, yes.
So as a future agenda item, the question would be if there's a consensus for us to research that.
I just think trying to protect our public, maybe we could do something to encourage.
Anyone else with a request for a future agenda item? Okay. No? All right, so the next regular meeting is scheduled for Monday, December 18, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. Again, I want to mention, I think this might be my last meeting as mayor. But I'll talk more about that next meeting. We'll adjourn this meeting in the memory of John Sharkey, a former city council member here in our city. The time is now 8:44 p.m.